lifelong Nazarenes, which basically means that they were Nazarenes from birth. They were ordained to be Nazarenes. They were never to cut their hair. They were never to drink anything from the vine. They were never to drink grape juice or anything like that, or wine. And they had to basically kind of live a very specific lifestyle. Samuel didn't have much of a problem with it. John the Baptist didn't have much of a problem with it. But Samson, well, he found Delilah, and, well, it all went downhill from there. But in chapter 7, we're going to go over the offerings and the dedication of the tabernacle. So, we learned a lot about this stuff when it came to Leviticus. We learned about how they built everything, how they created everything, what everything was for. In this particular case, we're going to see now, because right now they're still where they were at. So in Exodus and Leviticus, they've never moved. They're still there. They're still at Mount Sinai. We're getting ready to move. So we're going to start seeing this stuff actually come into play. So in chapter 7, verse 1, it says, when Moses finished setting up the tabernacle, he anointed and consecrated it and all its furnishings. He also anointed and consecrated the altar and all its utensils. Then the leaders of Israel, the heads of the families, who were the tribal leaders in charge of those who were counted, made offerings. They brought as their gifts before the Lord 6 covered carts and 12 oxen, an ox from each leader and a cart from every 2. And these they presented before the tabernacle. And the Lord said to Moses, accept these from them, that they may be used in the work at the tent of meeting. Give them to the Levites as each man's work requires. So Moses took the carts and the oxen and gave them to the Levites. He gave 2 carts and 4 oxen to the Gershonites as their work required. And he gave 4 carts and 8 oxen to the Merarites as their work required. And they were all under the direction of Ithamar, the son of Aaron, who's the great high priest. But Moses did not give any to the Kohathites, because they were to carry on their shoulders the holy things for which they were responsible. So the Kohathites will be the ones, we learn, like with the Ark of the Covenant, there's a bunch of rings on the Ark of the Covenant on both sides. They made like a 20-foot long golden pole, and the pole goes through the rings, and the Kohathites, and only the Kohathites, will be the ones that lift it up, put it on their shoulders, and they will carry all of this stuff above the ground. That's how this is going to get transported. So it says, when the altar was anointed, the leaders brought their offerings for its dedication and presented them before the altar. For the Lord had said to Moses, each day 1 leader is to bring his offering for the dedication of the altar. So every day, the leader of one tribe is going to come and bring their dedication. So real quick, just the first one, it says, the one who brought his offering on the first day was Nahashon, son of Amminadab, of the tribe of Judah. And his offering was yada, yada, yada. Okay, it's going to go down a whole list of stuff that he gave. So it goes on to the second day, then the third day, and then the 4th day, 5th day, 6th day, 7th day, 8th day, 9th day, 10th day, 11th day, and on the 12th day, Ahira, son of Enan, the leader of the people of Naphtali, brought his offering. And it talks about that offering. Now, here's the really cool thing about all of that. Okay? And this is something that one of those details about the Bible that I just really love. Okay? We learn in the book of Numbers all of the things, right down to the forks, the spoons, the bowls, the plates, all that stuff. All of it is recorded in the Bible, and they recorded it themselves. Okay? So they have a list of everything. Eventually, in 605 BC, Babylon will, for the first time, conquer Israel. They will conquer Israel completely in 605 BC. They will take all of the kings, princes, all that stuff, including Daniel and Ezekiel. They will be taken back to Babylon. That's when that happens. They will put in a vassal king. That doesn't go well. And then they come back in 598. And then they basically do the exact same thing again. They go there, ransack the place, declare, knock it off, do what we tell you to do kind of thing. And then one more time, they let it go until I believe it's I'm getting the dates right, I think it's 587. May have to look at the date for the last one. What's that?
586.
That's at 586, there you go. 586, essentially Babylon comes and destroys it. Utterly destroys Jerusalem. Just wipes it out. Okay? Tears down the walls, the whole 9 yards. And when that happens, that is when Israel essentially falls. And all of the Israelites are taken to Babylon. Now, here's the cool thing. In the book of Jeremiah, we learn about all this happening. Okay, so the book of Jeremiah he is the major prophet during this time period. Okay, during all of this time period. He's a prophet for about 40 years. And he's basically detailing all the stuff that's happening during this time. The book of Lamentations is Jeremiah writing about the 2-year siege that happens. So I got the dates wrong. So it's a 2-year siege, 588 to 586. 588, they come and they conquer it. No, I got them right. Yeah, 588, they come and they basically surround it, and they put a siege under it. And that siege lasts for 2 years. Nobody can get in, nobody can get out. Women are literally eating their babies. I mean, that's in the Bible. They're literally in the corner of alleyways boiling their children because they're starving to death. There's nothing to get in, nothing to get out. Jeremiah describes the rain falling down in Israel, or Jerusalem specifically, falling down in Jerusalem almost like the city is just weeping. It's undergoing that much, that much problem. Essentially, what winds up happening is everything is taken away. But all of the good stuff was taken away in 605. Okay, all of the stuff from the treasury, all of this stuff was taken away and taken back to Babylon. Okay? Later on down the line, and this is a historical fact, this isn't just biblical, I actually have a book, I can bring it in when we actually get to this part of the Bible. It's actually a Bible of Near Eastern ancient documents. And we actually have the document from Cyrus the Great where he is allowing everybody to go home. So now he's saying, okay, Cyrus the Great comes into power, Persia comes into power, Persia conquers Babylon, and they basically say, okay, look, time to go home. You guys can all go back. We'll fund everything. We'll fund for you to rebuild your city. We'll fund for you to rebuild your temples. Now, the Bible, it sounds like it's just the Israelites. It's not. It's everybody. It's everybody that they've conquered. Okay? And go home and you can rebuild everything and you'll pay taxes to us. So it's like a gigantic Marshall Plan. We're going to pay for you guys, all you slaves and everything, to go home, rebuild your countries, rebuild your cities, rebuild your temples, rebuild your homes, rebuild your walls, and you guys are going to start up your economies again, and you guys are going to pay us taxes. Okay, so that's how that worked. The interesting thing is that in the Bible, and also, I'm sure they had their own personal sheets, it documents every little thing that went back from Persia to Jerusalem. So right here, we're seeing the list of everything that was made. Hundreds of years later, we're going to see the list of everything that was taken from Jerusalem to Babylon, because they took it. Okay? It's all going to go back. Right down to the forks, the spoons, the bowls. Can anybody take a wild guess what was conspicuously missing out of that list?
No.
The Ark of the Covenant.
No.
The Ark of the Covenant. So a lot of people think that Babylon, when they ransacked everything, took the Ark of the Covenant. They didn't. It's not on that list. And I guarantee you that if you're literally marking down gold fork, gold spoon, gold bowl, Okay, they would mark down big box, angels on top of it, long poles. Nothing like that is on the list. The Ark of the Covenant never made it to Babylon. So this all happens in the book of Jeremiah. So what happened to the Ark of the Covenant? Well, there's a couple theories. One theory is Jeremiah hid it under the Temple Mount, which is entirely possible because even to this day, because of the war going on, just between the Muslims versus the Israelites, the Hebrews, all that stuff, nobody can dig under the Temple Mount. I mean, it would literally start World War III. So there are all sorts of places under there that nobody even knows how to get into. We actually have seen them on like radar. That's where it could be. Personally, I think that's where it is. The other option is at the end of the book of Jeremiah, very begrudgingly, goes to Egypt with all of the other Jews. He tells them, don't go to Egypt. You're going to die in Egypt. Actually, that's how it ends. They get to Egypt, and he says, you see all this wonderful sand here? Your blood is going to stain it. And that's it. And that's exactly what happens. Babylon comes, wipes out Egypt, conquers Egypt, kills everybody, and that's that. But some people think that Jeremiah brought the Ark of the Covenant to Egypt, where it eventually went to Ethiopia. Okay? That's where the story in Indiana Jones comes from. The Indiana Jones, the first movie and everything, is about the Ark of the Covenant being taken to Ethiopia. That's where that whole legend comes from. Now, if you go to Ethiopia, there's actually a church in Ethiopia where they claim that they have the Ark of the Covenant. And I don't believe that, but I will say this much. Whatever is in that church that they won't let anybody see makes the priest go blind every 2 years. Like a new priest has to go in there to take care of the Ark of the Covenant knowing in 2 years' time he will be completely blind. The radiation of it wipes his sight out. So I don't know if they just have a really cool meteor rock in there or something like that. I don't think it's the Ark of the Covenant, but anyway, whenever I read the list and everything, it always takes me to that part of the Bible because it's so cool, because it validates the fact, because like I said, so many people argue the fact that it's just like, well, Babylon came, they wiped out Jerusalem, they took the Ark of the Covenant. No, they didn't. They did not have the Ark of the Covenant. So it's just kind of interesting when you kind of follow the history of it. But nobody knows where the Ark of the Covenant is. So afterwards, after all those were given, it says in verse 89, it says, when Moses entered the tent of meeting to speak with the Lord, he heard the voice speaking to him from between the two cherubim above the atonement cover on the Ark of the Covenant law. In this way the Lord spoke to him. So we've heard before in Exodus and Leviticus, that he would basically be face to face with God as, a friend talks to somebody, like a friend talking to a friend. And I kind of stressed that when we read that. It's just kind of like, take that verse, basically meaning that he's close to the presence of God. He is not looking God in the face. Okay, we established that back in the book of Exodus and everything. If you look at God and you see God for everything God is, you're vaporized. You're done. And God says that flat out. He's like, look, I'll hide you in the cleft of a rock. I will pass by you. And he didn't even say you can look at me. He said you can see my glory. In other words, you can see the radiance that is following me as I walk. Okay? Cool thing. Later on down the line, when you actually kind of get into descriptions of God, Jesus, and all that kind of stuff, that is actually one of the things that Jesus is described as, is the radiance of God. So, and then we see him coming down from the mountain and him having this 40-day sunburn on his face and everything. That's, again, talking about the radiation. And I'm not trying to get all scientific and everything. I mean, we do that sometimes with the Bible. But the reality is that whenever somebody is around God, it seems like he emits some type of radiation. Well, I don't know what kind it is. I'm not a scientist. But there's always that physical effect on the person, on their skin and everything like that actually physically affects them. Now, you would figure that God could say, I'm not going to do that, and I'm not going to affect you in any way, but it doesn't seem to happen. It seems like anytime anybody is around God, they have this effect. So that's what this is telling us is now it's actually being more detailed. When Moses is talking to God, he's not going into the tent of meeting and having a conversation with a physical being. He's going into the tent of meeting, he's hearing the voice coming from above the cherubim that is on the Ark of the Covenant. That's where God's voice is coming from. So it says chapter 8, it says, the Lord said to Moses, speak to Aaron and say to him, when you set up lamps, see that all 7 light up in the area in front of the lampstand. So Aaron did so, and he set up the lamps so they faced forward on the lampstand, just as the Lord commanded Moses. And this is how the lampstand was made. It was made of hammered gold, from its base to its blossoms. The lampstand was made exactly like the pattern the Lord had shown Moses. Well, we saw it being made back in Leviticus. I believe it was Leviticus. So it says, the Lord said to Moses, take the Levites from among all the Israelites and make them ceremonially clean. This one would bug me. So it says, to purify them, do this, sprinkle the water of cleansing on them, and then have them shave their whole bodies and wash their clothes. Whole bodies. Eyebrows, everything. Gone. Okay? Anything on your body that the water cannot cleanse off. So anything where dirt or anything like that can get stuck into it, gone. Shave it all. Okay? Completely and totally. So, I could just see a bunch of guys walking around without eyebrows. So, I don't know. That's just one of those things I would be like, okay, Lord, can we be more specific? So it says, have them take young bull with its grain offerings and the finest flour mixed with olive oil, and you were to take a second young bull for a sin offering. And bring the Levites to the front of the tent of meeting and assemble the whole Israelite community. You're to bring the Levites before the Lord, and the Israelites are to lay their hands on them. And Aaron is to present the Levites before the Lord as a wave offering from the Israelites so that they may be ready to do the work of the Lord. Then the Levites are to lay their hands on the head of the bulls, using one for a sin offering to the Lord and the other for a burnt offering to make atonement for the Levites. Have the Levites stand in front of Aaron and his sons, and then present them as a wave offering to the Lord. In this way you are set the Levites apart from the other Israelites, and the Levites will be mine. And after you have purified the Levites and present them as a wave offering, they are to come to do their work at the tent of meeting. They are the Israelites who are to be given wholly to me, and I have taken them as my own in place of the firstborn, the first male offspring from every Israelite woman. So we read that, I think, in the last class. Originally, God had told Moses, all of the firstborn are mine. So firstborn children, firstborn animals, they are all consecrated to me. And then he decides he is going to take the tribe of Levi, which is essentially the tribe of Moses and Aaron. And basically says, okay, I'm going to do a trade. I'm going to let you guys have all the firstborns, but I get the Levites. And he does it so detailed that when there's actually more Israelites or firstborns than there are Levites, there's actually like a dollar amount set on each one, and they swap it. They pay. So it is completely and totally even, completely and totally balanced. So it says, every firstborn male in Israel, whether human or animal, is mine. And when I struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, I set them apart for myself. And I have taken the Levites in place of all the firstborn sons of Israel. From among all the Israelites, I have given the Levites as a gift to Aaron and his sons to do the work at the tent of meeting on behalf of the Israelites and to make atonement for them so that no plague will strike the Israelites when they go near the sanctuary. Moses, Aaron, and the whole Israelite community did with the Levites just as the Lord commanded Moses, and the Levites purified themselves and washed their clothes. And then Aaron presented them as a wave offering before the Lord and made atonement for them to purify them. And after that, the Levites came to do their work at the tent of meeting under the supervision of Aaron and his sons. They did with the Levites just as the Lord commanded Moses. And the Lord said to Moses, this applies to the Levites. Men 25 years old or more shall come to take part in the work at the tent of meeting. But at the age of 50, they must retire from the regular service and work no longer. They may assist their brothers in performing their duties at the tent of meeting, but they themselves must not do the work. This, then, is how you are to assign the responsibilities of the Levites. So if anybody asks the question and everything, what should be the proper retirement age? That's it. 50 years old. Shouldn't be working no more.
I agree.
I'm 6 years away. I kind of hope I win the lottery. But at the end of the day, the really cool thing, I put this in your notes, and as much as I'd like to say it was profound and it comes from me, it actually comes from Matthew Henry. And what it says in there is that every person that follows God has to undergo some type of a consecrating ritual, okay? So if you decide to become a Christian, you have to be baptized, okay? That's part of it, all right? You're being consecrated to God. If you decide to become a pastor, you have to be ordained, okay? And it just goes on and goes on from there, okay? There are certain levels of consecration to God, okay? There are certain levels of setting ourselves apart to God, okay? You have your average everyday Christian who should be baptized and obviously should be living the best life that they possibly can. Most importantly, they should really be helping that relationship between them and Jesus flourish. That's really what makes a Christian go, is that relationship between them and Jesus Christ. However, if you decide to become a pastor or a priest or something of that nature, well, now all of a sudden that's kicked up into high gear. Okay, Paul even says that not everybody should be teachers and preachers and stuff like that, because what excuse do you got? You know, I mean, seriously, what do you got? You're gonna stand before the Lord and say, I didn't know. You know, it's like, really? Well, if you didn't know, why were you teaching it? So, you know, there's all sorts of problems there and everything when it comes to the level. And I say problems just in the aspect of people just need to understand that. But the Levites had to do this. They had to shave themselves completely, wash themselves completely, and consecrate themselves completely to the Lord. And like I said before and everything, and honestly, I don't want to say it's a bum deal, but I mean, personally, I'm not the kind of personality that would like somebody telling me and everything, this is what you're going to do all your life. But the reality is that's the way it was with the Levites. You didn't choose to be a priest, you didn't learn to be a priest, you didn't aspire to be a priest. You were a Levite, you were a priest, that's it. That is what you did. Now, later on down the line, when we see the northern kingdom take off, there are going to be priests that are not Levites, and that opens up a whole big can of worms. But, so now we're going to go to the Passover. It says, chapter 9, it says, the Lord spoke to Moses in the desert of Sinai in the first month of the second year, and after they came out of Egypt, he said, have the Israelites celebrate the Passover at the appointed time. Celebrated at the appointed time at twilight on the 14th day of this month, in accordance with all the rules and regulations. So Moses told the Israelites to celebrate the Passover, and they did so in the desert of Sinai at twilight on the 14th day of the first month. The Israelites did everything just as the Lord commanded Moses. But some of them could not celebrate the Passover on that day because they were ceremonially unclean on account of a dead body. So they came to Moses and Aaron that same day and said to Moses, we have become unclean because of a dead body. Why should we be kept from presenting the Lord's offerings with the other Israelites at the appointed time? And Moses answered to them, I got no idea. Let me go ask. That's basically what he said. Wait until I find out what the Lord commands concerning you. So the Lord said to Moses, tell the Israelites, when any of you or your descendants are unclean because of a dead body or away on a journey, they are still to celebrate the Lord's Passover, but they are to do it on the 14th day of the second month at twilight. And they are to eat the lamb together with the unleavened bread and bitter herbs, and they must not leave any of it until morning or break any of its bones. And when they celebrate the Passover, they must follow all the regulations. But if anyone who is ceremonially clean and not on a journey fails to celebrate the Passover, then they must be cut off from their people for not presenting the Lord's offering at the appointed time. They will bear the consequence of their sin. A foreigner residing among you is also to celebrate the Lord's Passover in accordance with its rules and regulations. You must have the same regulations for both foreigner and native born. So, we've talked about this before. What is a foreigner? Okay, because there's two different classifications. You have a foreigner and you have a stranger. A foreigner is somebody who is not a Jew, not a Hebrew, living with the Jews and the Hebrews. They have to follow it. Now, a stranger does not. A stranger who is just passing through the land does not have to follow this stuff. But by the same token, it kind of works both ways. A foreigner has to follow the laws, but he also has the same rights, the same protections as anybody else in the community. A stranger does not. A stranger is just a drifter, essentially, and they do not have any of that. So the main thing that we kind of really need to take away from the Passover, obviously the Passover is, really well known in Christianity. The Passover meal was the meal that, Jesus, the Last Supper. Actually, I don't want to get into it. When I was researching that stuff and everything, there are a lot of people that actually argue whether or not that was the Passover meal. Like, I didn't even know it was a thing. And I started researching, and there's a whole lot of people that sit there and say just like, no, it wasn't a Passover meal. And it's just kind of like, well, because it was done on the day before. And it's, I'm just kind of like, I don't know, there's some validity to that, but I guess that's just one of those things that I've learned since I was a little kid. So, but I always assumed it was a Passover meal. It seemed to me that's exactly what it was.
Doesn't it state that in the Bible?
Well, that's what I was thinking. But also just like how everything works together, like we learned in Mark and everything, like they got up and they left. They didn't finish the Passover meal, and he's kind of like, where are they going kind of thing, because they're supposed to sing a song, they're supposed to wait for Elijah, stuff like that. But anyway, nonetheless, the Passover meal obviously is an arrow pointing to the cross. Okay, we talked about this before with all the different meals. All the meals deal with something in Christianity. So Passover deals with the crucifixion and the resurrection. Okay, the Feast of Trumpets, that deals with the rapture. I'm trying to think of another one real quick. Passover, Pentecost. So Pentecost, that deals with, that celebrates the 40 years in the wilderness, but Pentecost for us is the day that the Holy Spirit came into the world en masse, and that's the day the church started. So all of these feasts are really kind of markers for that, and that's why he's so insistent, God is so insistent that this has to be followed every single year. Because if you don't follow it every single year, when the day comes that Jesus Christ comes, nobody's going to recognize it. Nobody's going to pay attention to it. That's one of the reasons why it sits there and says you do not break any of the bones of the Passover lamb, because none of Jesus Christ's bones were ever broken. Okay? So it all ties into that. So it sits there, and now we're going to learn about the pillar of cloud and fire. Now, a lot of the stuff that we're getting ready to talk about, I've already taught you guys. I kind of like fast forward a little bit so that way we can understand what we're looking at. But now we're actually going to describe, the Bible is going to describe the pillar of cloud and fire. So it says, on the day the tabernacle, the tent of the covenant law was set up, the cloud covered it. From evening till morning, the cloud above the tabernacle looked like fire. So that is how it continued to be. The cloud covered it, and at night it looked like fire. And whenever the cloud lifted from above the tent, the Israelites set out. Wherever the cloud settled, the Israelites encamped. And at the Lord's command, the Israelites set out, and at his command they encamped. And as long as the cloud stayed over the tabernacle, they remained encamped. When the cloud remained over the tabernacle a long time, the Israelites obeyed the Lord's order and did not set out. Sometimes the cloud was over the tabernacle only a few days, and at the Lord's command they would encamp, and then at his command they would set out. Sometimes the cloud stayed from evening only till morning, and then when it lifted in the morning, they set out. Whether by day or by night, whenever the cloud lifted, they set out. And whether the cloud stayed over the tabernacle for the 2 days, a month, or a year, the Israelites would remain in camp and not set out. When it lifted, they would set out. And at the Lord's command, they encamped, and at the Lord's command, they set out. I think in this particular part of the Bible, Moses was writing something, and then he got distracted, and then he went right back to writing it, and then got distracted again, and then went back to writing it. Because he says the same thing over and over again. They obeyed the Lord's order in accordance with the command through Moses. So basically what this looks like is imagine you just have a tent, okay, which would be the tent of meeting, which would be, the tent of the covenant law. So you have the tent, and you have the Ark of the Covenant in the tent, okay? This cloud is basically brooding above it, okay? and you can kind of, like in the daytime, you can kind of see like flashes and stuff like that in it, but you really can't see much. But as the night falls, all of a sudden that flashing that's in there becomes more and more vibrant, and you're actually seeing the flashing and the fire that is inside the cloud. So it does numerous things. Number one, like he said, it's above the Ark of the Covenant, above the tent, and it's floating there. And they come out of the tent in the morning, they look up. If the cloud is just sitting above the tent, we're good, we're staying. Okay? If the cloud all of a sudden raises up and starts leaving, they leave with it. Now we're going to see them do this here in a minute, and it's going to be very organized. We're done of the days where 2 million people all pack up everything. Mama's got the goat, Dad's got the tent pegs and all that stuff, and okay, we're going to, follow along. This is going to look like an army. So that's one thing that the pillar of cloud and fire does. The other thing that it does is that it allows everybody to locate where the camp is. So if you're out in the desert and you've lost your way, you're going to be able to see that fire. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not a desert dweller, but I've seen enough videos and everything like that to know that out there, it's dark. Okay, there are no lights out there. You can see the stars and everything. So you're going to be able to see this massive thing of fire in the air pretty easily. And you're going to be able to know where to go to get back home. So that's another thing that it does. It acts as a beacon. Now, there's a common misconception, and I've had arguments with people about this before, but there's a common misconception because the Bible changes its wording. Okay? So, all the way up to where they get ready to cross the River Jordan and go into the Promised Land, which happens in the book of Joshua. Okay? It is called the pillar of cloud and fire. Afterwards, you never hear about the pillar of cloud and fire again. What all of a sudden pops up, though, is the glory of the Lord. It's the pillar of cloud and fire. It's the same thing. It's just now it has a different function. Okay? Now we're out of the wilderness. Okay? Now we're not setting up the tabernacle and doing everything like we're doing. Now we're a military. We're going in and we're wiping people out. And understand this, and this is kind of hard for people to understand. It really is. But understand this. God tells the Israelites when they cross the River Jordan, kill everything. Men, women, children, babies, animals, all of it. Kill it all. And you're like, why on earth would he do that? And the reason why is the exact same reason why when he sits there and he talks about the unleavened bread, and he sits there and he says, you cannot have yeast in the unleavened bread. If you take a little tiny bit of yeast like this and you drop it in that dough, that yeast is going to spread and it's going... Sorry about that. I thought I had that shut off. Weird. I hate iPhones, by the way. In case anybody likes iPhones, I don't. Androids are so much better. Look at my wife. She's the reason why I got one. But anyway, see, you're shaking. Is it a woman's phone? Is
no,
that
I
it?
don't like iPhones.
Oh, you okay? I was gonna say. I thought you were like, yeah.
All you do is flip the switch.
Huh?
There's a switch.
Yeah, it's operator error.
Thank you, Miss Ford.
Seriously.
I'm gonna just flip the switch.
That's all it is.
Anyway, back to the story here. Where was I?
Unleavened bread.
Okay, so the sin and everything that will spread through the unleavened bread is the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing when they cross the River Jordan. Okay, if they allow a child to live, if they allow a woman to live, what's going to happen? That person is going to infiltrate this holy people, and they are going to start causing problems. And God is doing everything he possibly can to try to keep these people holy. It doesn't work. They go over there, and I mean right off the bat, like right out of the gate, okay? They go over there, they're killing all the men and everything, wiping everybody out, open up the tent, getting ready to kill some girl, and go, wow, you're actually kind of nice looking. How you doing? I'm Brian. Like, I mean, that's how it went. Like, they started like, she's mine. Okay? They started intermarrying like right out of the gate. Right out of the gate. So this was a problem, all throughout. Like, eventually you're going to see Balaam. And Balaam and everything is going to try to curse the Israelites. You can't curse them. God won't let them curse them. But Balaam comes up with an idea. He's like, well, if we can't curse them, let's seduce them. So he gets a bunch of hot women from all the other tribes that are all around him and says, why don't you go over there and flirt with those nice Israelite boys? Sure enough, they do. And it infiltrates and it just tears them apart. You go all the way up to the point where you get to Saul. Okay? And, in the Bible reads, they want a king, give them a king. How you read that is, they want a king, fine. Give them a king. Because God is supposed to be their king. Mm-hmm. They're not supposed to be like everybody else. But they have adjusted and they have altered their culture so bad that now they are like everybody else. Okay? And it's one of those things that it's just like, that's the problem. If they would have listened to God, it would have been hard. I'm not going to lie, I would have had reservations about that. But at the end of the day, if they would have listened to God, it would have gone a completely different way. They never would have had a storm. They never would have had a flood. They never would have had a disease. They never would have had anything. God would have protected them. And here's the thing. So,
we wouldn't have the problem we got today with all the Palestinians.
No. And I'll tell you what, and I'm gonna get something thrown at me here. I know it. We were watching the end of that debate. I didn't watch the whole thing, but we probably watched the last half hour, okay? And at this point, I think we're up a creek either way. But he said something in that made me flat out know that Donald Trump doesn't know God, doesn't know the Bible, doesn't know anything about any of it, okay? I think he's better than the other option, but he just doesn't. And he said, if he is not president, within 2 years, Israel will not exist. And I'm like, Jack, Israel will exist. I assure you of this. Mm-hmm. Okay? That you are not going to save Israel. Right. It's like, I'm pretty sure. I really, I'm one of those comical dudes. I always have things up in my head and everything, almost like a sitcom. And I really, when he said that, I just saw God looking at Jesus going, did somebody fire me? Like, I thought that was my job.
I caught that too.
So yeah, it was not great.
I have a friend that's a Jew that he says the same thing.
What's that?
That if Cutters would get in, Israel will not be long longer. And he's a Jew, and I thought.
Yeah, well, he does. Yeah, no, Israel is where Israel is because of God, and I've said this 1,000 times before. Okay, and actually. I may get the famous person wrong and everything, but I'm almost positive Michelangelo said the exact same thing. When he walked up and everything to the emperor, and he sat there and he said, I can prove God with one word. And he said, what's the word? And he said, Israel. Okay, it is impossible, like literally statistically impossible, for a nation this small to be basically under foreign rule for 2/3 of a millennia. After that, completely and totally abolished to the wind, okay? And yet, even though they were in all different countries all around the world, they kept their individual culture going. They never stopped being Jews, okay? They did not interbreed with the culture at large. They kept being Jews until eventually God decided it was time, and they all come together. They form a nation in one day. That one nation is literally this big, and it is surrounded by nations 10 times their size, and they all want him dead. Mm-hmm. And they all tried attacking him at the exact same time, and in what was it, like 6 days? I think it's called a 6-day war. 6 days, Israel's just like, now, you want to try that again, or what's going on? Okay, tell me God doesn't exist. Seriously. It's just, this is ridiculous at this point. Okay, so easily the greatest evidence that God exists. But as we go through this, So it sits there and it talks about how, like, the pillar of cloud and fire. As we go through the book, we're going to see it change, okay? And I just want to make that abundantly clear that the pillar of cloud and fire will be with them all the way up until we get to the book of Ezekiel. And I read that before in the book of Ezekiel. Essentially what happens is all heck is breaking loose. The temple is utterly, completely, and totally infested with corruption. I mean, the priests are literally in secret walls and everything, worshiping statues of insects, okay? I mean, it's gotten that bad. And the pillar of cloud and fire, the cherubim, which we all have this little, cute baby with a butt sticking out, little thing, that's not a cherubim. Cherubims are really big, monstrous angels. The cherubim come and get the pillar of cloud and fire. And you see the pillar of cloud and fire go from above the Ark of the Covenant, fly up, basically kind of hang there for a bit, eventually make its way to the entrance of the temple, make its way to the beginning of the Temple Mount, and then it goes down, and then it goes up the Mount of Olives and stops for a second, almost like it's turning around and saying goodbye one last time, goes down the Mount of Olives, never to be seen again. Until we get to AD 32, when Jesus Christ goes the exact opposite way. Where's the first place he goes on Passover? The temple. Even though nobody's there, nothing's going on, he goes right back to where the pillar of cloud and fire left. Because he was the pillar of cloud and fire. So, it sits there, and we're talking about chapter 10 now. And now we're going to learn about the silver trumpets. Now, we're going to learn how the silver trumpets are made, but the silver trumpets have already been made. So the silver trumpets are going to be pretty important in how this all plays out. So it says, the Lord said to Moses, make 2 trumpets of hammered silver and use them for calling the community together and for having the camp set out. When both are sounded, the whole community is to assemble before you at the entrance to the tent of meeting. If only one is sounded, the heads of the clans of Israel are to assemble before you. When a trumpet blast is sounded, the tribes camping on the east side are to set out. At the sounding of the second blast, the camps on the south side are to set out. The blast will be a signal for setting out. To gather the assembly, blow the trumpets, but not with the signal for setting out. So you're going to have a 1 trumpet blast. You're going to have a 2 trumpet blast. You're going to have different sounds coming from the trumpet that are going to mean different things. Okay? These trumpets, just like the tabernacle, just like the Ark of the Covenant, are a shadow and a copy of what is actually in heaven. When we get to the book of Revelations, we're going to see the angels sounding the trumpets. Okay? This is basically the same thing. But what ultimately is going to happen here is if they want everybody to come, okay, like the whole assembly, they're going to stand out around the courtyard, and they're going to blow the trumpets both at the same time. And that means everybody come, okay? If there's 1 trumpet blast, that means the leaders come, okay? When it's time to leave, they are going to leave in a very specific order. Now, we talked about this the last class, how it looks like a cross, okay? So you have the north, east, no, I'm doing it wrong, north, south, east, and west side, or west and east side. Stop. I'm talking fast here.
Homeschooler.
I'm looking. Hey, I got a master's degree. I'm looking up, but I'm kind of like acting like a priest. I'm up here doing this kind of thing. But anyway, at the end of the day, you sound the trumpets, and one particular side is going to pack up, and they are going to start leaving. Then the other side, then the other side, then the other side. They are going to be going like an army. Like a military, they're going to be set out between tribe, clan, family, okay? So they are going to be organized, and they are going to be set up ready to go. So it says there, and it says the sons of Aaron, the priest, are to blow the trumpets. This is to be the lasting ordinance for you and the generations to come. And when you go into battle in your own land against an enemy who is oppressing you, sound a blast on the trumpets. Then you will be remembered by the Lord your God and rescued from your enemies. Also, at your times of rejoicing, your appointed festivals and moon feasts, you are to sound the trumpets over your burnt offerings and the fellowship offerings. and they will be a memorial for you before your God. I am the Lord your God. So talk about the Feast of Trumpets. The Feast of Trumpets, they blast 100 sounds of the trumpet. Now, when you sit there and you talk, you're reading that one verse about the rapture, it sits there and says, Paul talks about it, at the last trumpet. Now, some people will argue that last trumpet is the 7th trumpet in Revelation, okay? Which means, if that's true, that means that the church will go through the tribulation at least up to a point, okay? I don't think that's what it's talking about, okay? And the reason why I say that is because the book of Revelation was written way after Paul writes what he's talking about there, okay, which is in Thessalonians. So, written literally 20 years after the fact. So, if he's sitting there talking about the last trumpet, and then 20 years later you find out that there are going to be 7 trumpet judgments and everything, that's not really going to hold a lot of water. When he sits there and he's telling the Israelites, the Hebrews and everything, at the last trumpet, if I'm a Hebrew and I'm living in this culture, the first thing I'm thinking of is the Feast of Trumpets. At the last trumpet. At the 100th trumpet, that's when it's going to happen. Now, does that mean that we're going to be raptured on the Feast of Trumpets? Not necessarily. Okay, because that could also mean, again, the trumpets were a foreshadowing of what's going on in heaven. For all we know, there's a feast going on up there, and then that last trumpet, we don't see that in the Bible anywhere. So then you're kind of grasping at straws. But nonetheless, you can kind of look at that both ways. You can look at it as he's talking about the Feast of Trumpets, which everybody would understand, or he's talking about the 7th trumpet in Revelation, which nobody would even know what he's talking about at that point because Revelation wasn't even written. And it wasn't like it was common knowledge because it was given specifically to John. So, but anyway, so as we go on about the trumpets, now the other thing that we're going to see about the trumpets is, Cindy's going to get a kick out of this one. So I've taught you guys and everything about Jericho, right? How Jericho fell.
Right.
Okay, so that's the last thing that takes place before they charge. Okay, so they're circling the last day. They're circling. They walk off, and they turn around, and they sound the trumpet. But the last part of it was, after they sound the trumpet, what Jesus tells him, the angel of the Lord tells Joshua is, shout. Okay? And that's why I say, it wasn't a miracle. It was a miracle that he was told this, but it was kind of like a Jacob thing with the spotted goats and stuff like that. It was, you do X, Y, and Z, and A, B, C will happen as a result. He did exactly what happened, and all the people that are up on these walls watching these yahoos making circles around the camp going, what are these people doing? Now all of a sudden these people are turning around and screaming and yelling the other way, and when they ran the other way, the walls of Jericho went right out like that. And that's exactly how the walls of Jericho fell. They fell out. They didn't fall in. So that's another way you see the trumpet. The trumpet is also used for battle. It's used for all sorts of different stuff. So there's different ways of sounding it. There's different times, there's different reasons, but that's what these are, the silver trumpets. Now, some trumpets and everything that we learn about and everything are going to be the shofar, which I have a shofar. Those are really hard to play. I to this day, I can't do it. But those are basically ram's horns, but they're really cool looking. They stink, but they're cool looking. So it says the Israelites leave Sinai. So now we're getting ready to pack up and we're getting ready to go. So they have been here now for almost, a year and a half almost, about 14 to 15 months. Now we're getting ready to go. So it says on the 20th day of the 2nd month of the year, the cloud lifted from above the tabernacle of the covenant law. And then the Israelites set out from the desert of Sinai and traveled from place to place until the cloud came to rest in the desert of Paran. They set out this first time at the Lord's command through Moses. The divisions of the camp of Judah went first under their standard, and then it's just going to go on and on and on. Okay, division, standard, division, standard, division, standard, division, standard. Everybody is going out one after another exactly as they're supposed to go out. So we went from a big old group of 2 million people to now we're a legitimate army. Okay, now we're organized. Now we know what we're doing. Now I know what I'm supposed to be carrying. Now I know where I'm supposed to be. So, it says, we'll just go to verse 25. It says, finally, as the rear guard for all the units, the divisions of the camp of Dan set out under their standard. And Ahazar, son of Ammishaddai, was in command. And Pagiel, son of Okran, was over the division of the tribe of Asher, and Ahira, son of Anan, was over the division of the tribe of Naphtali. This was the order of the march for the Israelite divisions as they set out. Now, Moses said to Hobab, son of Ruel, the Mennonite, Moses' father-in-law, we are setting out for the place about which the Lord said, I will give it to you. Come with us, and we will treat you well, for the Lord has promised us good things to Israel. And he answered, No, I will not go. I am going back to my own land and my own people. But Moses said, Please do not leave us. You know where we should camp in the wilderness, and you can be our eyes. Now, Moses was in the wilderness for 40 years. You know, he was out there for a long time. But this guy has lived out there his entire life. He knows things that Moses don't know. It says, If you come with us, we will share you whatever good things the Lord gives us. So they set out from the mountain of the Lord and traveled for 3 days. And the ark of the covenant Lord went before them during those 3 days to find them a place to rest. And the cloud of the Lord was over them by day and when they set out from the camp. And whenever the ark set out, Moses said, Rise up, Lord, and may your enemies be scattered, and may your foes flee before you. And whenever it came to rest, he said, Return, Lord, to the countless thousands of Israel. So, now we have all this nice in place. Everybody knows exactly where they're supposed to be. Everybody knows exactly where they're supposed to go and what they're supposed to do. And everything should be hunky-dory. Let's keep reading. So it says, Now the people complained about their hardships in the hearing of the Lord. And when he heard them, his anger was aroused. And then fire from the Lord burned among them and consumed some of the outskirts of the camp. And when the people cried out to Moses, he prayed to the Lord, and the fire died down. So that place was called Taberah, because the fire from the Lord had burned among them. The rabble with them began to crave other food. I don't know if anybody's got a King James, but in the King James it will sit there and say mixed multitude. So the mixed multitude are the people that came out of Egypt that are not actually Hebrew. Okay? So in the NIV and a lot of other books, you'll see rabble, but in the King James specifically, it's called mixed multitude. Essentially, what they are, so say like an Egyptian man found a Hebrew slave girl, appealing, and he married her and had children, okay, which was a thing. It wasn't necessarily, like hip hip hooray, but it wasn't, something he was going to get ostracized for. Then all of a sudden, here comes Moses and Aaron, and all this stuff happens, and the wife is like, yeah, we're going, and I'm taking the kids with me. And sometimes the man probably went, other times the man didn't, probably. But at the end of the day, that is the mixed multitude. The mixed multitude are the people that are kind of on the fringe, on the outsides of this culture. They're not actually Hebrew, but they've come along. So now they're starting to cause problems, because they're kind of looking at this situation going like, I kind of felt compelled to go and everything, but I mean, all these rules and these laws and this and that, and I'm eating this stuff that's on the ground every day, and it's just kind of like, Egypt really wasn't all that bad. It was cool. They had leeks there. But at the end of the day, they just started complaining. And God got fed up with it. So it says they began to crave other food. They were tired of eating the manna for a year and a half. And again, the Israelites started wailing. So now it went from the mixed multitude complaining about it. Now all 2 million people are wailing about it. So it says, if only we had meat to eat. Remember the fish that we ate in Egypt at no cost. Also the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and garlic. But now we have lost our appetite, and we never see anything but this manna. The manna was like coriander seed and looked like resin. I don't know. I'll be honest and everything. Moses could have had a conversation with God, like, come on, man, like, what is this? Like, we can eat this stuff during the week, but at least on the weekends, can we have a few berries or something? Like, something going on here? But, yeah, this stuff was kind of, I really would like to see it. I would love to be able to see what manna actually looked like. But the problem is, though, is that it says that it fell from heaven, but you never really actually found out what it was. I mean, it's literally what manna means, is what is it? You didn't know if it was like hardened dew, if it was grasshopper droppings, if it was like, you didn't know what it was. It was just this stuff that just kind of appeared. And there had to be somebody sooner or later just coming out of the tent just waiting for it to come down to see how this stuff actually formed. I don't know. I would have. But it says the people went and gathered around it, people went around gathering it and then ground it in a hand mill or crushed it in a mortar. They cooked it in a pot or made it into loaves. And it tasted something like made with olive oil. And when the dew settled on the camp at night, the manna also came down. So Moses heard the people of every family wailing at the entrance to their tents. And the Lord became exceedingly angry, and Moses was troubled. And he asked the Lord, and here we go. I've said it 1,000 times. Moses and God, married couple 101. Okay, this is it right here. Why have you brought this trouble on your servant? What have I done to displease you, that you put the burden of all these people on me? Did I conceive all these people? Did I give them birth? Why do you tell me to carry them in my arms? As a nurse carries an infant to the land you promised on oath to their ancestors. Where can I get meat for all these people? They keep wailing to me, give us meat to eat. I cannot carry all these people by myself. The burden is too heavy for me. If this is how you're going to treat me, please go ahead and kill me now. We've had that conversation once or twice. So it says, if I have found favor in your eyes, do not let me face my own ruin. And the Lord said to Moses, okay, bring me 70 of Israel's elders who are known to you as leaders and officials among the people. Have them come to the tent of meeting, that they may stand there with you. And I will come down and speak with you there, and I will take some of the power of the Spirit that is on you and put it on them. And they will share the burden of the people with you, so that you will not have to carry it alone. So tell the people, consecrate yourselves in preparation for tomorrow, when you will eat meat. The Lord heard you when you wailed. If only we had meat to eat. We were better off in Egypt. Now the Lord will give you meat, and you will eat it. You will not eat it for just 1 day, or 2 days, or 5, 10, or 20 days, but for a whole month. You will eat it until it comes out of your nostrils, and you loathe it, because you have rejected the Lord, who is among you, and have wailed before him, saying, why did we ever leave Egypt? But Moses said, here I am among 600,000 men on foot, and you say, I will give them meat to eat for a whole month. Would they have enough if flocks and herds were slaughtered for them? Would they have enough if all the fish in the sea were caught for them? And the Lord answered Moses, is the Lord's arms too short? Now you will see whether or not what I say will come true for you. So Moses went out and told the people what the Lord had said, and he brought together 70 of their elders and had them stand around a tent, and then the Lord came down in the cloud and spoke with him, and took some of the power of the Spirit that was on him and put it on the 70 elders. And when the Spirit rested on them, they prophesied, but did not do so again. However, 2 men whose names were Eldad and Medad had remained in the camp. They were listed among the elders, but did not go out into the tent. Yet the Spirit also rested on them, and they prophesied in the camp. A young man ran and told Moses, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. Joshua, son of Nun, who had been Moses' aide since youth, spoke up and said, Moses, my lord, stop them. But Moses replied, Are you jealous for my sake? Because I wish all the Lord's people were prophets, and that the Lord would put his spirit on all of them. Then Moses and the elders of Israel returned to the camp. So, real quick and everything, does this story remind you of anything that we read about in the Gospels? So, there's a part in the Gospels that I'm pretty sure we read it in the Gospel of Mark, and it may be in the Gospel of Matthew, but there's a part in the Gospels where there are people prophesying and basically teaching and preaching in the name of Jesus. And they're kind of sitting around a campfire, it kind of seems like the conversation is going, and the disciples tell Jesus, well, we saw some people and they were preaching and teaching in your name. We told them, knock it off. They ain't one of us. You know? We followed the rites yesterday. So, Jesus is like, yeah, don't do that. You know, don't do that. And ultimately, Joshua thought the exact same thing. Why? Because the belief was that this was kind of like a private club. Okay? Like Moses is the only one that could prophesy because Moses is so great and so amazing and everything. And Moses is like, dude, I wish everybody had the Spirit of God on them. My job would be easier. We would be moving faster. You people wouldn't be crying over stupid stuff. And this would all be going a lot better. Okay? Same thing with Jesus. Jesus is like, don't stop them. Okay? Just because they're not one of quote-unquote us doesn't mean they're not one of mine. So, don't do that. But Joshua, you know, and Joshua's a pretty smart kid. He's obviously going to be one of the main characters here soon. But he just thought he was doing Moses a favor. So, it says, verse 31, it says, Now a wind went out from the Lord and drove quail in from the sea. Now that's odd. I've never been able to figure that out. Most of the Bible teachers that I know and commentaries that I've read and everything, kind of odd. That's not typically where quail would be. But nonetheless, quail, which we thought about raising quail for a short time and everything, little tiny birds, you know, fly them up and everything literally with a knife in one hand, 5 minutes, came in from the sea, and it scattered them up to 2 cubits deep all around the camp, as far as a day's walk in any direction. All that day and night, and all the next day, the people went out and gathered quail. No one gathered less than 10 homers. Then they spread them out all around camp, while meat was still in between their teeth, and before it could be consumed, the anger of the Lord burned against the people, and he struck them with a severe plague. Therefore, the place was named Kibroth Hattaavah, because they buried the people who had craved other food. And from Kibroth Hattaavah, the people traveled to Hazeroth and stayed there. So, essentially what happens here is, and there's a couple different ways we can look at this. So, you could sit there and say that God, you know, struck them down with a plague and everything like that. I'm sure he did, but I don't necessarily know that he did it directly. Because the reality is this, okay? You have quail that are 2 cubits deep. In other words, you're literally walking around and they're like this deep all around the place, okay? They're just in piles all over the place. Millions of quail have just decided to fly into camp and die, okay? People are literally inside their tents and birds are going poof, 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 all over the place. They're falling all over the place. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if I'm outside and I'm cooking steaks on a grill, and I've got all the little garnish and everything and all my little seasonings and stuff, and all of a sudden this bird out of nowhere just goes plop right in front of me, I'm not going to look at that and go, yeah, I got room, and put it on the grill. Okay? This bird died for a reason. So, evidently nobody in camp thought about that. I don't know if they just thought this was God's gift and God was going to protect them, whatever the case may be. But nonetheless, everybody that ate this stuff, not everybody did. There were a lot of smart people in the camp. But everybody that ate this stuff died. Now, The other thing we have to realize is God sits there and says, you're going to eat this stuff for a month, okay? When we were in Exodus and the beginning of Leviticus and stuff, we learned about all the different laws, okay? One set of the laws was the dietary laws. And I've said before, the dietary laws were a specific set of laws for a very specific reason, okay? When they set up shop, when they finally had a nice culture going, all the way up to the days of Peter, God comes down and tells the Jews, yeah, you don't have to follow this stuff no more, okay? We're cool. A lot of them still followed it, but nonetheless, he says you don't have to follow this stuff no more. The dietary laws were put in place because you're talking about 2 million people in an environment where literally, if somebody dies and they are not buried within about 10 hours, they will start to decompose above ground. Okay? Extremely hot. Sun beating down. No refrigeration. No medical doctor if somebody gets sick. No medication. Okay? You have to keep yourself healthy in this particular type of environment. And they're eating dead animals that they have no idea why they died. So they're getting sick and they're dying of food poisoning is what's going on. So the plague that I think God put on them was, he's just like, look, man, we're just going to let this lie. Okay? You eat this stuff, you're going to have a problem. And I'm not going to save you. This is all on you. You want this so bad? Fine, have it. Okay? It's exactly like the king. You want this so bad? Fine. Here it is. You're going to love it. This is going to go great. So that's what's going on here. These people are eating this stuff that just literally just dropped out of thin air. And mind you, they're not all over the place walking around and they go kill them. They're dead. What's up?
Okay, so they're dead. Do
Yep.
they cook them before they eat? Or do
Oh
they
yeah,
eat?
no, I have no doubt in my mind and everything they cook them, but the problem is though is that it doesn't matter if you cook them or not. I mean, there's some bacteria and some diseases and everything that you
Right.
can cook out, but I mean other ones you can't. The reality, it's just like vultures. Like vulture is one of the things that you do not eat, and the reason why is because the thing is literally eating nothing but dead animals.
Right.
Okay, there ain't no fire in the world that's going to get rid of the bacteria that's in that meat.
It doesn't say that they're dead.
They dropped out of the
It said
sky.
It said the wind went out from the Lord and drove quail in from the sea.
Okay, so rolled in from the sea, it scattered them up to 2 cubits deep all around the camp as far as a day's walk in any direction. All that day and night people went out and gathered quail. No one gathered less than 10 homers, in other words, basketfuls. Have you ever captured a whole bunch of quail and put it in a basket? They were dead, honey. They were dead, okay? Quail can fly, and they can fly fast. Nobody's going around and just picking up quail and throwing it in a basket and saying, stay there until, I cook you and everything. They were dead. So that's what's going on here, is that a bunch of birds fly around, just drop dead on the floor, and all of a sudden these people get sick. Well, duh. But notice it sits there and says, while the meat was still between your teeth and before it could be consumed, the anger of the Lord burned against the people, and he struck them with a severe plague. So in other words, the people that were eating the meat got sick.
Right, because where they get it.
Yeah, so that's what's going on there. So now, I think I got time. So it says, Miriam and Aaron began to talk against Moses because of his Cushite wife, for he had married a Cushite. So if you remember, when the father-in-law originally came back, so Moses and his wife were having major issues as this stuff was going on. Predominantly because Moses wanted to circumcise his sons, okay? She wasn't having that. And it actually said that God had planned on killing Moses. Didn't really say why, but you could kind of defer from the story. Basically, the Spirit of God planned on sneaking up on Moses and killing him, okay? Because he wasn't doing what he was told to do. He was told, circumcise all the men in your house, okay? Didn't do it. The wife wouldn't let him. So eventually, the next story that you see right under that is she circumcised the boys, takes the foreskins, throws them at Moses' feet, and calls him the bridegroom of blood. It's good to know that drama and everything wasn't invented in this century. So nonetheless, that's what happens, and obviously major issues are going along. When Moses starts gathering all the people and they start moving out and they're at Mount Sinai, he sends them packing. He sends the kids, he sends her, and he says, go back to your daddy. Kind of done with you for right now. So she goes back to daddy. Daddy says, this ain't happening. I've got a whole bunch of other girls here. I just married you out. No way, or 40 years ago. No. This is his problem. He brings them back. Okay? We just saw the conversation he had with his father-in-law. So, some point in time, we don't know where, we never hear about Zipporah again, his wife. We never hear about the boys again. Now, all of a sudden, he's married to a Cushite. So, Miriam and Aaron, who were both older than Moses, have an issue with this. It says, hasn't the Lord spoken only through Moses, they asked? Hasn't he also spoken through us? And the Lord heard this. Now, parenthetically, and understand Moses is writing this. Now, Moses was a very humble man, more humble than anyone else on the face of the earth. And at once the Lord said to Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, come out of the tent of meeting, all three of you. So all three of them went out. And the Lord came down in the pillar of cloud, and he stood at the entrance of the tent and summoned Aaron and Miriam. And when the two of them stepped forward, he said, listen to my words. If God ever says that to you, you've probably done something bad. Because I've said that to my kids before. Shut up and listen to what I'm getting ready to say, because it's going to be real important for the next 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. So it says, when there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, reveal myself to them in visions. I speak to them in dreams. But this is not true of my servant Moses. He is faithful in all of my house. And when I speak with him, I speak face to face, clearly, not in riddles. And when he sees the form of the Lord. Again, he's not seeing the Lord's face. So why then are you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? And the anger of the Lord burned against them, and he left them. And when a cloud lifted from above the tent, Miriam's skin was leprous, and it became as white as snow. So this is like not she just got leprosy. This is like she's had leprosy for 10 years. Aaron turned toward her and saw that she had defiling skin disease, and he said to Moses, please, my Lord, I ask you not to hold against us this sin we have so foolishly committed. Do not let her be like a stillborn infant coming from its mother's womb with its flesh half eaten away. So Moses cried out to the Lord, please, God, help her. And the Lord replied, did I do something wrong?
You said helper.
Oh, healer, sorry, yeah. Same thing, come on, guys.
No, help and healing is kind of different.
All right, the Lord replied to Moses, if her father had spit in her face, or if her father had spit in her face, would she not have been in disgrace for 7 days? Confine her outside the camp for 7 days, and after that she can be brought back. In other words, she'll be healed. So Miriam was confined outside the camp for 7 days, and the people did not move on until she was brought back. And after that, the people went Hazeroth and encamped in the desert of Paran. So now, something we need to understand about this story. Okay? It sounds like God and everything is punishing her. Now, mind you, Aaron was doing the exact same thing. So it looks like God's kind of picking on her and everything. But do you guys remember? How I've taught you guys before, and I've used a couple different examples because of this. One of which was the man and everything that gets lowered down. But I sit there and I talk to you guys about when Jesus and everything heals, he doesn't necessarily do what people automatically imagine he's going to do. Okay, and that not just in the Bible, but in our lives. Okay, Jesus attacks the problem. He doesn't attack the symptom. Okay, he goes after the real issue. Okay, that's exactly what he does in that story with the man that's being lowered down. The first thing he says isn't you're healed. The first thing he says is my son or my friend, depending on which version you're reading, your sins are forgiven. That was the problem. That was the problem. It wasn't, for that man, that was the problem. For his friends, because later on it sits there and talks about his friend's faith. And Jesus sits there and says, He's talking to the Pharisees, and he says, he knows who I am, but so you know who I am. You know the Son of Man is with you. And then that's when he turns and he heals him, and the Bible says that because of his friend's faith. Okay? In other words, now he went from, he's already taken care of that prayer, that need. Now he's talking to the Pharisees. He's talking to the Pharisees and saying, you know what? Just to show you who I am, I'm going to grant their request too. And then he tells the man, get up and go home. Okay? But Jesus takes care of the actual problem. This is exactly what happened here. Okay? These three people are brothers and sisters. Okay? They're family. And they are the family that is in charge of this 2 million people. And they are having this huge fight, okay, about who he married. Okay? Major ordeal. And God, like a dad, literally, is calling his children out and says, get out here now. And he talks to Miriam and Aaron. And after he gets done talking to Miriam and Aaron, Miriam is leprous. Now, she could be dead, but she's not. She's leprous. What happens right after that? Both of the brothers that were fighting over this major deal, now they are coming to the aid of the sister, and they are begging God to heal the sister. So, in doing what he did, God took care of the problem, and he healed the family, is what he did. He's like, you know what, you got all these stupid little differences and everything you guys got problems with and all that kind of stuff. Let's actually see what happens and everything when one of you guys gets cancer. Let's see if all these stupid little issues and everything like that really matter. Okay? He brings the family together in doing what he does. So that's just one of those situations where we can really see just I don't want to use the word brilliance because he's God. It's not like he has an IQ. But just the incredible wisdom and insight that our God has. Because he sees the problems that we're too stupid or angry or selfish or stubborn or whatever to see. He sees the problem when we can't because we're blinded by something dumb. So that's what happened in that story. And of course, she was healed 7 days. You know, God sets the punishment, and you know, God's one of those kind of dads and everything. It's just like, look, if I'm punishing you, the punishment's going to stand. She sits out there for 7 days. But the only person, and the Bible says this, and this is where Jesus and everything really, his reputation really started to soar, was when he started curing people that had leprosy. Because leprosy, the word leprosy is in the Bible is sera'at. Basically means skin disease. It doesn't actually mean, I think it's called Hansen's disease nowadays, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. But any kind of a skin disease, any kind of a defiling skin disease that would make the people stay away from all the civilization, the culture, you know, have the bell around their neck and all this kind of stuff, walking around sitting there saying unclean, unclean. The only person that can heal that is God. That's it. God is the only one that can heal it. So when Jesus starts healing the people that have this sara'at type of condition, everybody's just kind of like, well, the scripture itself tells us that the only person that can heal this is God. So now you have a dilemma, you know. Was the person faking the entire time? You know, I mean, I'm sure there was all sorts of conversations going back and forth. But nonetheless, that's one of the things that Jesus really did that cemented the fact. If anybody sits there and says that the Bible never says that Jesus is God, number one, grab a Bible and say, will you read this? Because they've never read it. They just haven't. They're looking on YouTube or they're looking on Google or whatever the case may be. You know, that they've never read it. There are so many things that show us that Jesus Christ was in fact God. It's mind-numbing. So at the very end, okay, so we're on 13. We might be able to get through it pretty quick. So it says, the Lord said to Moses, send some of the men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am going to give to the Israelites. From each of the ancestral tribes send one of its leaders. So at the Lord's command, Moses sent out from the desert of Paran, and all of them were leaders of the Israelites. And these are their names. And we're going to go down, and we're going to see all the different leaders. Now, the two that really need to stand out is
Caleb.
and Joshua. Man, I'm going to blank. It's right in front of me. So, Caleb and Joshua. Caleb which Caleb in Hebrew and everything means dog. So I don't know if he looked like Dog the Bounty Hunter, but that was Caleb. So Caleb and Joshua. A lot of people kind of assume that Caleb was like second to Joshua. In a lot of ways he was. But at the same point, he was definitely his own dude. He was his own personality. At the end of this, when all this ends and all the fighting is over with, and they're now starting to distribute the land between the Israelites, Caleb walks up to Joshua and says, "Look, that piece of property over there, that's mine. And if you got anything to say about it, let's step outside." Mm-hmm. So, which Joshua says, "Here's the deed, my brother." He doesn't want none of Caleb. So Caleb, I kind of see Caleb as just, what's that movie that is it Bruce? No, it's not Bruce Willis. Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson's in Braveheart. So if you've ever seen Braveheart, I kind of see Joshua like Braveheart, and the big red-headed dude that was his best friend and everything. That's kind of like Caleb. It's just that really kind of fits their personalities. So we go through all that. That's all the names. And then verse 16, it says, "These are the names of the men Moses sent to explore the land." Parenthetically, Moses gave Hosea, son of Nun, the name Joshua. So when Moses sent them to explore the land of Canaan, he said, "Go up through the Negev and onto the hill country, see what the land is like and whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. What kind of land do they live in? Is it good or bad? What kind of towns do they live in? Are they walled or unfortified? Or are they unwalled or fortified? How is the soil? Is it fertile or poor? Are there trees in it or not? Do your best to bring back some of the fruit of the land." Parenthetically, it was the season for the first ripe grapes. So they went up and explored the land from the desert of Zin. It's also called the desert of Sin. As far as Rehob toward Labo Hamath. And they went up through the Negev and came to Hebron, where Ahiman, Sheashai, Talmai, and the descendants of Anak lived. Parenthetically, it says Hebron had been built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. So when they reached the valley of Eshcol, they cut off a branch bearing a single cluster of grapes. 2 of them carried it on a pole between them, along with some of the pomegranates and figs. And that place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster of grapes the Israelites cut off there. And at the end of the 40 days, they returned from exploring the land. Now think about that for a second. They literally have a pole in between 2 guys, and they're carrying 1 cluster of grapes. That is a big cluster. Okay? So this land is definitely fertile. This land is definitely, viable for having all these people on it, like God is telling him. He said it's the land of milk and honey, which is essentially goat milk and date honey. But what we're going to find out the next time we come, and we'll start. I don't want to get into the report just yet. We'll do that when we get back. But when we get back and we start learning about the report, we're going to find out that 12 of them went up there. 10 of them are going to come back and go, there ain't no way we're going to beat these people. These guys are huge. No way. Okay? Now, mind you, there's all sorts of different people up there, but one of the peoples up there that are the real major problem area are the Philistines. And the Philistines are the one that have all of the, I don't know if you want to call them giants, but essentially they are most likely, well, not most likely, it says it in the Bible, they are essentially the descendants of the Nephilim. Now, whether or not you believe the Nephilim were heroes of old and like heroes of renown, like Genesis says, or if you believe, like many people believe, that really, while I don't particularly like the book, it talks about it at great length in the books of Enoch. But at the end of the day, a lot of people believe that the Nephilim were essentially giants because they were the mix of human females and angels. And I've said before, when we were going through Genesis, there is a absolute ton of evidence throughout the last at least 300 years before this country was even set in place, that there were people on this earth that literally were 15, 16, 17 feet high. Now, when I'm talking about giants, I'm not talking about giants that can pick up a mountain, but I mean, these people were huge. They've actually found a sword and everything that was the size of me. So, but the problem is that every single time one of those were ever found, and a lot of them, there were great big gigantic burial mounds where they found numerous ones. Every single time that happened, there would always be some outside source that would come in. Eventually, it would be the Smithsonian, and the Smithsonian would come in, and they would basically take over the place. They would take over the dig. All the bones, all the artifacts, and everything would be completely taken away, and nobody would ever see them or hear from them ever again. And that has happened historically literally 100 times. I mean, it just happened over and over and over and over and over again. Where the Smithsonian would come in, confiscate everything, take it, go, and you would never see it again. And so, yeah, it's 100%. I'm not a conspiracy guy by any stretch, but it's 100% just one of those kind of things that they don't want you to see that, because that is one of those things that if that is actually proven real, who's going to question the Bible at that point? That's one of those key things that it's like, okay, this is all true. So, but anyway, the descendants of the Nephilim are living there in the Philistines, and essentially you're going to eventually meet Goliath, but he has sons, and we meet them in the books of Samuel, particularly, if I remember correctly, the end of 2 Samuel. So, anyway, we'll stop there. By the way, since we got a few minutes and everything, I probably taught this story too, but this is actually kind of cool. When we get to that story, which will be a long time away, when we get to the story of David and Goliath, one of the things that a lot of people miss is that when David picks up the stone, he doesn't pick up one stone, he picks up 5. Okay? The reason why is because when you read about it in the end of 2 Samuel, you kind of see flashbacks of David's life and David's men's life. And what happens is that there are 4 other giants. So when we talk about the bravery and the faith of David, everybody talks about the faith of David standing before the giant, and all he's got is his shepherd's sling and a rock. He looked up on the ridge, and he saw 4 more giants, and he grabbed 5 rocks, and he's just like, just in case they decide to come down and play. So that dude there's a reason why God says he's a man after my own heart. That man had faith. I mean, real, true faith. So we'll go ahead and we'll pray, and we'll get out of here. Dear Lord, thank you so much. Thank you for your word. Just thank you for the things that we learned in Numbers, and please just help us to, once again, really just digest it. I know we're not Hebrew, we're not Israelites. Many of those rules really aren't for us, but there are so many things that we can get out of it. And one is just who you are for your children, who you are for those that follow you, and who you are for those that seek you. And even though we don't have the pillar of cloud and fire anymore, we have something so much better, and we have the risen and glorified Christ now. So just do everything you can in our lives to smack us upside the head if we need be, and just keep guiding us toward Him. And Lord, we just love you. We praise you so much, and we thank you for all your provisions. And we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.